There's this absolute classic text of American urbanism that I couldn't recommend more to anyone, and that's Peter Norton's Fighting Traffic, the dawn of the motor age in the American city. And Peter's professor at the University of Virginia, I believe, he wrote this book, very heavily researched. It's so interesting what this chapter of history that's been just removed from our consciousness. But there was widespread outrage against private motoring when it was introduced at the beginning of the 20th century. The fact that there were so many people being killed, the fact that it was primarily wealthy people who were running over and killing so many working class children and elderly people in particular for not getting out of their way quickly enough. And what Norton did with this meticulously researched book is demonstrated how the American automotive manufacturers basically, made government do their bidding and order people out of the streets, which from time out of mind prior to this had been full of all kinds of activity, pedestrian activity, merchant activity, children playing, people just going out, public activity, political activity. This was all the things that were going on in our public space, which were our streets. But when motor vehicles and mass production of motor vehicles came to the fore, it was like, sorry, the only thing there's room for in our streets now is cars that move people quickly from one place to another. And so the automobile companies started to put together a model curriculum that was put in all of the public schools. Commandment number 1, don't play on the street. Stay in the sidewalk or in your yard. The street is for autos. Autos are increasing. Streets are not. Therefore, the street is dangerous at all times, and you must remember to always be careful. This was the message that people were being given after having been raised traditionally to believe that public space was not a place of danger, but it was actually a place of coming together of people. It's where community was born. It's where people learned about new political ideas, heard new languages that they hadn't heard spoken before. It was an enriching factor in human life, not just moving cars from one place to another. And what Peter Norton has done for us in this amazing book is shown how that entire way of approaching public space was just wiped clean, and all of a sudden we came up with this thesis that the streets were made for cars, so everyone else should get out, right? It's absolutely incredible. And in particular, one campaign he talks about to bring speed governors to cars, a campaign to force drivers to put mechanisms which were widely available. The technology was there back in the 19-teens and 1920s. And in Ohio, they wanted to put a speed governor on every car that could be legally operated on the street. I think the cap was either 15 or 20 miles an hour. There was a referendum that almost won, and had it won, that probably would have put us on a different historical trajectory than the one we find ourselves playing out now. We would have been in a place where there was a cap speed beyond which most motor vehicles would not travel. And perhaps even then they had the insight to understand that the fatality curve from motor vehicle collisions is not linear. You don't have that one unit more greater fatal outcomes with each increase in mile per hour of speed. What you have is most crashes are not fatal when they occur at 20 or fewer miles per hour, and crashes are more likely than not fatal when they occur at 25 to 30 miles an hour, and especially at much higher speeds. So there was an intuitive understanding that speed governors, just by slowing things down, increasing reaction times, and decreasing the amount of force by which collisions occurred, you could have far fewer fatal outcomes, and this epidemic of traffic violence that suddenly came into being in the 19-teens and 1920s, could be limited that way. But motordom won. Speed governors have not been implemented anywhere. In fact, you look at any commercially produced motor vehicle, just the speedometer on it, and it shows the vehicle can measure itself traveling at speeds greater than 100 miles an hour. Why is that? Why is it that just about every single automobile you can purchase will allow you to drive it at faster than 100 miles an hour when there's nowhere you can do that except on a closed course? How many people have actually ridden their vehicle on a closed course? No one. People are riding them in cities like this. So what do we need 100 mile an hour capacity for in these vehicles? Nothing. It's absolutely nothing. And it's just like the clearest indication that there's something going on here that just doesn't add up. And this car blindness we have, that we just don't think it's odd that all these cars can go 100 miles an hour, even though we know it would be undesirable and unlawful for them to do so. The fact that, we think the streets are just for cars and don't understand that they could be so much more, and in most of human history have been for so much more: cultural enrichment and activity and political activity and recreation and fitness and so many other dimensions of human experience and activity. Now we've just reduced them down to traffic sewers. You stop, you go back and you read all of this great history and these primary sources that Peter Norton found for us and put together in this book, and you realize, the wool has been pulled over our eyes. So time to pull it back off.